All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on our fourth webinar for Kentucky. So Kentucky is well underway. It's medical cannabis application round. It's a really cool lottery style, but minimum requirements. You have to have basically a pass or fail application to get into the lottery. So there's a lot to consider. And that is why we've been putting out these webinars for you. They're free. It's just content that we're trying to educate people on before they sign on with us so that they can better understand this process and put their best foot forward. So today we have a couple new topics to discuss, specifically the operation plan section. This seems to be the most underestimated section of Kentucky's application, so we wanted to really dive into it. And let's introduce the team really quickly. My name is Emily Cisneros. I'm the founder and CEO of Canna Business Services. And then we've got Beth Panicucci,
the Director of Operations, Beth Panicucci, and I'm here to talk more about the Kentucky application requirements today.
Perfect. And we've got Marissa Cortez.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Cortez, Canna Business Services General Manager. Excited to speak about the operational plan in Kentucky today.
Awesome. Okay, so why don't we just jump right into it? We've got the plan of operation listed out by Team Kentucky, which is the name that the Office of Medical Cannabis has given itself. Team Kentucky, they're cheering you on as you trudge through this application round. We are almost halfway through. By the time this webinar is released, we will likely be halfway through that application round, which means you have a month or less to get your application complete and qualified to get into the lottery, which is a whole thing. Actually, Marissa, why don't you start off by just kind of giving us an overview? We've touched on it before, but I think it's worth mentioning again what this process looks like as far as pass, fail, getting into the lottery, and these action letters, what they're all about.
Absolutely. So a high-level overview of what Kentucky's application process looks like pertaining to the essential pass or fail or action or no action letters, as Kentucky calls it, and then getting into the lottery. So as we did mention earlier, actually just a few minutes ago, this is an application that you want to get right the first time. There is very minimal time. Once we get to August 31st, which is the deadline for submission, following that, the state is going to send what they call action or no action letters. If you do receive an action letter, that means that there are deficiencies on your application that need to be corrected within a very small window of time, 10 days to be exact. So that is a little bit different than what we see in many, many other states, typically the minimum being 30 days. So there is very minimal time here, and some of those items that were marked as deficient by the OMC in Kentucky might be ones that you cannot get completed in those 10 days. So you don't want to risk it at all. So make sure you get your application right the first time.
Perfect. So now let's jump right into the plan of operation. It's the slide I had up just a few moments ago, but we wanted to give you that intro because we thought it was important. Now, diving right in, Beth, why don't you talk us through the plan of operation?
Sure. The plan of operation in Kentucky is really similar to the content that we see in most other states. Similar name, it's just all one document with 8 parts instead of separate documents like we might see in New Jersey or New York or Alabama, any of those other states really. So the content, however, is really similar. So you're required to submit an intended plan of operation of the proposed cannabis business, and this will describe how you plan to address areas of operations. You don't have to go into specific standard operating procedures, which is where I think some of the confusion about this application is coming in. The standard operating procedures come after you've been selected in the lottery to move forward. You need to submit them then. This is an overall general plan of operations that addresses certain areas of the business. And it still has to align with all the regulations, which are quite lengthy and cumbersome. And you will need to make sure they're all addressed in order to get full credit on this plan.
That actually brings a really important point, and I think it's the biggest misnomer with this Kentucky application round. The plan of operation is not just a few sentences, and we're going to talk about that more. But the biggest mistake people are making is jumping right into this thinking, oh, I just have to submit a document or two. That's not true. They actually have plans and procedures they want you to submit. Like Beth had just mentioned, there's at least 8 of them that you need to actually draft out. Now, you don't have to go in super full detail where you're doing the day-to-day operations that don't necessarily exist, but you do have to have some daily operations in your response. So that's a really important and a critical aspect of this application that people are completely missing, and it's going to sneak up on them by the time they try to submit at the end of August and they realize they're missing a bulk of this application. Most application rounds in different states don't require all of this documentation just to get into the lottery. And we have heard a few people say, oh, that's not required yet. It is required now. Kentucky is doing this differently. You have documentation that you are required to submit just to get a complete and full application to get into the lottery. If you are pulled from the lottery and selected, you'll owe more paperwork, but a lot of this is due now.
Those are all really great points, Emily. And I just want to add to that, 8 sections, you might think that doesn't sound like a lot. However, for example, one of the sections is security, and we'll talk more about the rest later on. Security isn't really just one topic. Security brings in cameras and personnel and access and alarms and all different kinds of things. So they're really much bigger than just 8 sections, if you're thinking that.
Another important thing to note as well is in all of the documentation for Kentucky, it's very heavily emphasized that the operational plan must be in accordance with all Kentucky regulations. So you need to be well versed in not only what a traditional security plan would look like for a dispensary or a manufacturing facility, whatever it might be that you're applying for, but on top of it, what Kentucky is looking for as well.
And I think it's a good segue into accepted documentation. So on the OMC's website, they ask for outlines and summaries of that the business intends to have on a day-to-day. So they're talking a minimum of the items included here.
So this example was provided by Kentucky in the application guide that they published, which is very helpful. However, we believe it to be a little bit misleading in what you need to submit, because they're showing that under security, which is that first one, and I know it's really, really tiny here, but you only need 5 or 6 bullet points. There's no way that addresses all the regulations. Kentucky's intention is to show you what formatting is acceptable for submitting this, not a complete example with all the content that you might need, because what would this be to stop you from copying and pasting it and submitting it as your own? They want to see your plans for each of these sections. So while they're showing a page and a half, likely you're going to be upwards of 60, 75, maybe even 100 pages in order to encompass summaries and outlines for all of these sections and addressing all the regulations as well.
That is a huge point, and I have not heard that talked about yet in any of the educational materials I've seen put out by anybody. And this is crucial to getting this application correct. Don't mimic the page and a half that is provided by the state of Kentucky. The state of Kentucky cannot put out full operational plans as examples, because that's intellectual property that they may have. They may be taken from someone else as an example, so they couldn't do it. And the other aspect is, if they put a full plan on here and you just copied it and put it in your application, they'd probably get in trouble. They could get sued if they put in the wrong information. They can't put a lot of detail in examples because they could be held to what they put here, and you could point to them and say, hey, you put in your operational plan that I could only have 1 light, 1 camera per room. I didn't need to make sure there were no blind spots. So these are just examples. And I think, Beth, you make a great point. It's a nice example of formatting and what type of things they'd like to see, because a lot of people have never done this before. They go into this blind. We've done this in pretty much every regulated state, so we would actually bolster this way more. But the formatting is there, and I think that's a really nice thing that the state has given us. But Beth, Marissa, we have seen and been in so many states on so many applications. We know the type of application that has to be put forth to qualify here. And it doesn't have to be a Georgia, Alabama example that's thousands and thousands of pages, but it cannot be 2 pages per plan.
Exactly. And I think too, Kentucky wants to see that you've done your homework, you've dug into the regulations. If they award you a license, you're going to follow everything they want to see in a cannabis business, and they're not going to give you an example to just copy and paste. So this is the time where you need to dig into the regulations. They're quite lengthy. There's regulations and emergency rules in effect that will need to be addressed when you develop this operations plan.
Absolutely. So let's jump into the cannabis specific processes. So you had mentioned earlier, Beth, that there were 8 things that the state said at a minimum they would need to have on every application.
Yes, so there's 8 sections of the operations plan, and the state actually leaves it open-ended. They'll take more than this if you want to give it to them, but they want to, at minimum, see these 8 sections addressed and cannabis-specific processes for each one. So we have them listed out here. They seem, like general topics, but like I mentioned previously, in terms of security, you are opening a lot more boxes when you're completing that security section than just general security of the building. I mean, you're talking lighting, guards, cameras. When you talk about employee qualifications, you're talking about background checks, management, training programs, security. You have security coming in there too, customer service. There's so many pieces of each of these 8 sections to address. To jump down to record keeping too, like you're looking at, employee record keeping and inventory record keeping and security record keeping and visitor record keeping. So there's all different kinds of things addressed in each one of these subsections that it will be crucial for you to include, or you won't be selected for the lottery.
You also want to ensure that what you're putting into this application is realistic for you. Don't, find something like Emily said online or on Google and copy and paste it if it's something you don't plan on actually implementing and carrying out should you receive that license.
And I think that's the challenge. And we've had people come to us, and God love them, they find something on Google, they found something somewhere, and they bring it to us and they say, hey, we just need this, just a quick review. We think it's at the finish line and we'll be ready to submit. And we'll look at it and we'll say, yeah, this is not compliant whatsoever. It's not, and we don't get any joy from that. We would love to be able to help people get swiftly to the finish line. Sometimes those drafts are so bad that we have to redo them. And that's not a critique on our clients. Our clients have never done this before. That's our job, is to build this for them. So when someone tells you, hey, you can find this, or hey, you could copy this from another state, take a look at it, make sure that it is actually compliant with the regs. More often than not, we've actually never seen an application come from another state that is compliant with another state's regulations. It doesn't happen because there's nuances to every state, every municipality, everything like that. So we are big fans of doing this right the first time, because that ultimately saves you money, it saves you stress, and you really don't have the luxury of doing it incorrectly the first time, because you've got a 30-day or less window to get this done correctly. 10 days if you get an action letter, and if you've got 2 pages of an action letter listing out all of the deficiencies in your application, you will not have time to make those corrections sufficiently in order to get placed in the lottery. And it would break our hearts to see people not get in the lottery after trying so hard. And we've seen it happen before. We'll see it happen again, unfortunately. So if we can help you avoid that, I would say watch all of our webinars, arm yourself with all of the knowledge that you can get, and put your best foot forward in this application round.
And one other thing I want to bring up is we're hearing a lot of people are waiting to start on the application until they've locked up a property. And at this point, that can be a huge mistake. Even if you say, God forbid, your property doesn't get locked up this round, but you started all the application pieces simultaneously, Kentucky's already communicated they're going to have more rounds in 2025. So you'll be ahead of the game for a follow-up round. But to have a property locked up, say 3 weeks from now, and then trying to get every single other piece of this application completed after that, including site plans we've talked about previously, financials, all the operation plan pieces, it's not going to be possible for you. It's going to be too late. And then you'll be sitting on a property and not have the application submitted in time. So you really, at this point, need to start on both tracks simultaneously to be successful.
It's a great point. So while we have this contact us page up, this is where you can find us by email. You can go on our website, cannabusinessservices.com, and you'll see a little sample of our Calendly. We've got a really convenient option to just book online with us for a free consultation through our online Calendly, and then it will send you a Zoom link and a calendar reminder. It's really simple, and our clients love it. So certainly take advantage of that as well. So while we wrap up this webinar, why don't you all give us your final thoughts and suggestions for applicants looking to apply in Kentucky's lottery round? Marissa?
At the risk of sounding a little repetitive, the time is now. You need to get prepared and apply now. As we mentioned multiple times in this webinar and previous webinars, you have till August 31st. That is just under 5 weeks away. That is not much time. So start now.
And I would say don't wait on certain pieces of the application while you're locking up others. You need to be working on multiple tracks at the same time. There's things you can prepare simultaneously while you're waiting on other things. And there's documentation you need to get back from the state if you're filing businesses that could take days or weeks. And it's really important not to wait on any one piece at this point, because you're halfway through the round, to Emily's point at the beginning, in order to get everything in time and be successful.
That's great. Yeah, I would say if I could give a piece of advice for anyone looking to apply in this round, it would be to make sure that you are not waiting to secure your property in order to start the other application pieces. Like Beth said earlier in this webinar, if you do that, you may find yourself at the last week of August before you even start, and there's just not enough time. And I think it goes back, it harkens to what Beth has said throughout this webinar, what Marissa even just stated in her summary. Start now. And it's not because we are pushing you to rush into this. It's because if you don't start now, you will not have enough time to get to the finish line. And you may be sitting on that property that you secured for this round, but too late. And you'll be sitting on it until the unknown date in 2025 when the state opens up its next round, like Beth had mentioned. So feel free to tune in to any one of our other webinars. We are tracking along Kentucky on our website. We have a state page dedicated to all things Kentucky. We've got numerous blogs, social media posts. So track along with us and you'll be arming yourself with all the education that you can get in order to have your best foot forward, put your best foot forward in the state of Kentucky's lottery round. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.